Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in the seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in the seat. Make yourself comfortable. You can sit in any seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in the seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. And if you need any additional notepads, we have those available for you, and additional writing instruments, also known as pencils. We also have those available for you. Just come on in and make yourself comfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for returning in a timely fashion. I really appreciate that. Everyone was on time. That is wonderful. This is a great day today, and we're ready to resume. Would you have the witness return to the... You may be seated. I don't know why y'all standing, but you may be seated. Deputy, she's trying to get your pencil. Somebody needs a pencil, notepad, what do they need? Tissue. We provide that also. Provide Kleenex. We're going to get a jury. We need extra boxes. We'll pass those to you. You might need any additional Kleenex. You can leave the box over there. We'll get another box. We have plenty of boxes. Thank you, Deputy Garrett. Come on up, Mrs. Trump. Deputy Garrett's going to swear you in. It's a new day.
Shayna Citron, S-H-A-Y-N-A, C-I-T-R-O-N.
Good morning, Ms. Citron.
Good morning.
When we left off yesterday, you were a bit emotional. Why? How do you feel about being here?
It's very hard being here. Andrea was one of my closest friends. She was like a sister to me. My kids called her Aunt Andrea. My kids called Rusty Uncle Rusty. Rusty's parents are in here. It's just very hard to talk about.
Thank you. I want to back up if I can just a little bit.
You may.
Thank you, Judge. You told us about the birthday lunch that you had the year of 2010 with the defendant.
Yes.
Do you remember the date of that lunch? Or what's the date of your birthday?
The date of my birthday is September 12th.
And did you have lunch before or after your birthday? Do you remember?
I don't recall the exact date. The reason I know for certain that September 1st was on September 1st was because I had paid the bill and I went back to check my records once I was subpoenaed and so forth.
Okay.
But
that was the first discussion that it's only the two of you were present for. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the birthday lunch, I believe you said it was the three of you.
The three of us. Andrea and Joanna had split the bill and didn't let me pay, so I don't have a credit card receipt to go back and look at.
Do you remember if it was close to your birthday?
I believe it was close to my birthday. It was probably a couple of days after,
Okay.
with everybody's busy schedules.
Maybe the weekend of, do you remember if it was on a weekend or a weekday?
It was a weekday.
A weekday. Okay.
Because Andrea was going back to work, and I remember standing, talking to her after the lunch. I think Joanna had excused herself to go to the restroom or something, and I remember standing with Andrea outside of the restaurant, talking to her, asking her again how everything was going. And I remember doing that, and because because it was the first opportunity that particular day I had a chance to talk to her alone, since Joanna had been there, and I knew Joanna did not know any of this other stuff about the boss. And earlier that month, on September 1st, I remember asking Andrea point blank if something had already happened between her and her boss.
Did
And
she answer that question?
she didn't want to really answer the question. But she finally did answer the question, and
What did she say?
she said no.
Do you remember her demeanor when she answered that question?
Well, like I said, she didn't really want to answer, and she looked away from me. And whereas during that whole lunch, our eyes had been locked on each other's, and it was just a much different moment than the rest of the lunch, or the previous part of the lunch.
So, outside of the restaurant at the birthday
Oh,
lunch,
I'm sorry.
Joanna is in the restroom,
Mhm.
and you have an opportunity to speak to the defendant alone.
Correct.
Do you remember what the two of you discussed at that point?
Not specifically, just, how are things, how are you and Rusty, and how is it with the boss? Can you handle this?
Pretty much discussing those things that the two of you had previously discussed privately.
Yes.
Do
Anyway,
you-
I remember having to be quick about it because she had to get back to work, and so therefore I know it was during the week.
Okay. Do you know, or do you know how the defendant felt about the frustration she was having as a result of her feelings towards Rusty? Did she say anything to you that expressed the way she felt as a result of those things? What effect, if any, was Rusty having on her?
She was just done.
And was it affecting her ability to continue on and have energy and thrive?
Two objections.
Yes, sir.
One is as to leading, the other is as to speculation. You can say what the defendant said to her, but you cannot testify as what you believe the defendant said.
All right, I'm going to sustain the objection. Want to
Yes.
rephrase the question?
Yes, Judge. Did she tell you how having to focus on Rusty made her feel?
She's very tired. Yeah, she said that she's very tired of it all, tired of Rusty always coming first. And what I mean by that is, what I said yesterday, that everything was just always about him and him not being happy, and when he wasn't happy with his career path or his job or the amount of money he was making, it affected the entire family life, and they weren't happy if he wasn't happy.
Do you know whether or not the defendant's daughter, Sophia, had a birthday party that year?
Yes, she did.
Do you remember the month of 2010 that Sophia's birthday would have fallen in?
September.
September. So the same month as your birthday?
Yes.
Before or after your birthday?
Before.
Before your birthday?
Yes.
Which was on the 12th.
Right.
Do you remember if you had the birthday lunch before or after Sophia's birthday?
My birthday lunch
your birthday.
was after Sophia's birthday.
Do you know Sophia's birth date?
Oh my gosh, I can't recall, but she normally had the birthday celebration like the 5th of September, I believe it normally was.
All right. And
Whatever that weekend would fall on.
And was there a party for Sophia?
Yes.
Did you attend?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not there were pictures being taken at that party?
They always were taking pictures. Yes, there were pictures being taken.
And did you have an opportunity to observe the defendant and Rusty during Sophia's party?
Yes.
Describe the demeanor of both the defendant and Rusty during that party.
Well, my husband and I, actually my family and I, have always attended Sophia's birthday parties, and they were always at their lake house. And, oh, can I go back to one of your previous questions?
Yes.
Okay. Another thing that she told me on September 1st is that she was also just tired of going to the lake every single weekend. It was something that they had been in the routine of doing for quite some time, and just even that became tiresome. And the lake house had been Rusty's sanctuary. That was one of the most favorite places on earth for him. And I know that in the beginning it was for Andrea too. It was a place where they found very therapeutic. And I'm sure that once she started working at GE and just with the schedules and so forth, it just got very busy and hectic, and then to pack up the whole house and the whole family to then go to the lake every weekend became another struggle as well. I'm sorry, what is the previous question? The current question?
Yes. Did you have an opportunity to observe the defendant and Rusty at Sophia's birthday party?
Yes. So, anyway, again, her birthday party was at the lake house, and her birthday party was always at the lake house, and we had always attended, I believe. There may have been one year that we did not attend, actually, maybe right after I gave birth. I think there was one year that we did not attend because I had just given birth to
But did you attend in
my second child. This particular one that you're referring to, September 2010, yes, we attended. Mm-hmm.
Describe the demeanor of the defendant and Rusty. Were they their normal selves, as you knew them to be at Sophia's previous parties?
No, they were not their normal selves.
How were they different?
Well, in previous years, Rusty would wait until the end of the party to start taking people out on their boat. He would wait until most of the guests had left, or whoever was staying for the evening. They used to, since their lake house was, I don't remember how far away it was from Atlanta, but it was a drive. So many times people would come up and stay for the whole day and have dinner that night, and et cetera. So oftentimes he would wait until almost the end of the party to take people out on the boat. But on this particular day, it was almost like he could not wait to start taking people out on the boat. And I believe the boat was already running and people were on it when we even arrived. He just could not wait to be on the boat. This is in 2010.
Was Rusty on the boat as well?
Yes, Rusty was driving the boat.
Did the defendant get on the boat with him, or did she remain back at the house?
She remained back at the house. It was almost as if they could not be further apart from each other.
Okay. Now I want to direct your attention to an opportunity that you had to visit the defendant's job at GE. Okay?
Okay.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you remember about when that may have been?
It was later in September. I don't recall the exact day. But it was definitely
Before or after the second lunch, which would have been your birthday lunch. Before or after that?
After that.
Okay. What was the purpose? Why were you going to her job?
So Andrea and I would pass clothes back and forth for the children. So what I mean by that is my daughter, who's younger than their daughter Sophia, would receive Sophia's hand-me-down clothes. So the clothes that Sophia had grown out of, she would pass to us for my daughter. And then in reverse, our son is older than their son Ian, so we would pass our son's clothes to them for their son Ian. On that particular day, or the meeting that you're referring to, again, it was later in September sometime, and my daughter had already started dance class for the year. And I realized that her tap shoes were too small. And I realized her tap shoes were too small. So I contacted Andrea to see if Sophia had any tap shoes that she had outgrown that my daughter could use.
Did Sophia have tap shoes for your daughter?
Yes.
And were you going to go pick them up?
Yes, I was going to pick them up since since her office was relatively close to my home. I was just going to go pick them up from her office.
And did you, in fact, go to her office to pick up the shoes?
When I say I went to her office, I mean that I went to, I thought I was going to be going into GE. I wasn't sure, and I had never been there before, so she had to tell me exactly where to go and whatever. I did not go into GE.
Where'd you go?
I pulled into the area where GE is, or the campus of GE, and driving down Powers Ferry, I took a right or something, and I literally left my car right there, and over here was the parking garage, and I believe she came either out of the parking garage or from that area, and I had just rolled down my window. I thought she was literally just going to be handing me the tap shoes, and then that was going to be it, and I was going to be on my way.
Did she just hand you the tap shoes and leave?
No, when she came up to my car, I said, "So how are you?" And she opened the door, the passenger side of my car, that door, and she sat down in the car.
Were the two of you going to go someplace? Why did she sit in the car?
No, we just stayed right there.
What happened?
We just started talking.
Talking about what?
A lot of the same as to what we had been talking about previously, her relationship, what had been going on, but the main thing that I remember from that conversation was that she was telling me about a fight that she and Rusty had just had.
Do you remember what the fight was about? And when you say fight, are you speaking of a physical fight or an argument?
I'm not aware of it being physical, no. It was just to my knowledge, what she told me is yelling or conversation. I don't know if it was yelling, but a strong conversation, and she said that she was extremely upset about this particular fight because it had been in front of the children.
And do you know what the fight was about?
Again, the same. All of this working that she was doing and all of this traveling that she was doing, and she still wasn't making as much money as he did, and they're not even covering their expenses with the amount of money that she's making.
Do you know whether or not the time she spent with the kids had become an issue, or the time she wasn't spending with the kids? Do you know whether or not that was an issue that bothered Rusty, based on what she said?
Objection as to complete speculation.
It was based on what she said.
Well, I'm going, based upon what quote unquote she said, I'm going to overrule that objection. You can answer the question based upon what the defendant may or may not have said to you in your presence.
Okay. She said that Rusty said, all of this time that you're spending away from the family, you're a terrible mother for being away from the family and missing all of these things that are going on with the children.
And this happened in front of the children?
Yes.
Did she tell you how that made her
It made her feel horrible.
Was it something that the two of them, did she tell you whether or not the two of them were able to get over this the same day, or was it ongoing?
She said that they hadn't spoken for a week. And I asked her, my God, I mean, if you guys had sex, what's going on? She said,
I know this isn't easy.
Is that a question?
It's not, Judge. I'm just trying to
You need a break?
I'm trying to gauge that. Do we need to take a break, Ms. Citron? I think,
Is that yes, no?
No, okay.
we'll continue. So you asked her if the two of them were having sex. Did she answer?
Yes. No, Shayna, we haven't had sex for a long time. There's too much fighting.
How long did this conversation take place in the car?
Like an hour, I guess, roughly. I don't know. It was a long conversation, much longer than I thought. I thought I was just going to pick up the tap shoes.
Did she appear to be upset? Was she crying during this exchange?
No, she was not crying. She was just very matter of fact.
And at some point, did she get out of the car?
Yes.
Do you remember what she did once she got out of the car?
She immediately started texting on her walk back. Like she was still next to my car as she was texting.
I want to move on to Halloween party of 2010. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now, are you okay or do you need a break?
I'm okay.
Was there a Halloween party of 2010?
Yes.
Who would host the party?
My parents.
Did the defendant and Rusty attend each year? Was it an annual party?
It was.
Did they attend each year?
Yes.
And do you recall, did the two of them kind of have a costume that they were known to wear each party?
Yes.
What was it?
A king and queen costume
And they had worn the king and queen costume pretty much
every year.
every year. What about in 2010? Did they dress as a king and a queen?
They did not.
Do you remember how they were dressed?
Yes.
How was she dressed?
She and Sophia were matching. They were dressed as like sock hop girls and poodle skirts and striped shirts. Their hair was in a ponytail, and I remember Andrea had bright pink ribbon in her hair. She looked amazing. She looked the happiest I had seen her in a very long time, just absolutely radiant and glowing.
And what about Rusty? Do you remember how Rusty was dressed?
Even her complexion was just absolutely gorgeous. How was Rusty dressed? He was dressed up as Fred from Scooby-Doo, and Ian was dressed up as Scooby-Doo.
So Rusty and Ian kind of had matching outfits, and the defendant and Sophia had matching outfits this year.
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to observe Rusty's demeanor during the Halloween party?
Yes.
Describe his demeanor.
He was wiped out. His face was just completely, almost he just looked very wiped out. His eyes, everything.
Did he look as happy as the defendant looked?
No.
Did the defendant ever mention to you that she and Rusty were taking a cruise? This was a Halloween, so would it have been the end of October that this party occurred?
Yes, it was October 31st.
It was on the 31st. Did the defendant mention to you that she and Rusty were taking a cruise together
No,
the following month?
no. I asked her how things were going, and she said, okay. And one other thing that I recall about the costumes is my husband and I were dressed as Fred and Wilma Flintstone. So comically, both of our husbands were Freds, just of different characters. And I remember my husband and Rusty saying, "Hey, Fred, how's it going, Fred?" And then the other would say, "Hey, Fred, how's it going, Fred?" And I remember my husband saying, "What happened to the king and queens?" And Rusty said, "I had to dress this way to save my marriage."
Did she ever tell you they were going on a cruise?
No, she never told me until after Rusty was murdered. I sort of had to hear about it as everyone was talking in the house.
As everyone was talking in the house when?
I'm sorry, after the murder.
After the murder? Do you recall the day of the murder?
Oh, yes. Very, very vividly. I will never forget the day of the murder.
Where were you?
I was in Phoenix, Arizona.
So how did you learn that something had happened to Rusty?
Andrea called me.
Do you remember about what time it was?
I was on the way to, I was on the way to a spa, an exercise class. I believe the exercise class was going to be like a 9 o'clock exercise class. So around 8:30 or so.
That was Arizona.
I'm sorry, Arizona time. It was around 8:30 or so that she called me, and Arizona is 2 hours behind Atlanta time. So I guess that was around 10:30, something like that, Eastern time.
All right. She called you? What'd she say?
I almost didn't pick up the phone. I had texted her the night before telling her that we were in Arizona. So I knew that she knew I was out of town, so if she was calling me, there must have been a reason. So I picked up the phone. And when I picked up the phone, I was immediately saying, "Andrea, I can't talk right now,"
Why not? What did you have going on in the car?
because I was in a rental car and I had my GPS on my cell phone routing me to where I was going, and I was afraid that if I was talking on the phone, I would miss any directions or whatever that my GPS was trying to tell me.
So
So,
when you said you couldn't talk, did you hang up?
no,
Why not?
because Andrea was screaming into the phone.
What was she screaming? Was she just screaming or was she saying something?
No, she said, Shayna, Rusty's been shot. I don't know if he's alive or dead. We're on the way to the hospital.
You sure she said he had been shot?
Yes,
And she was on her way to the hospital?
yes. I will never forget that for the rest of my life.
And she said she didn't know at that time if he was dead or alive?
Yes.
What'd you say?
It started shaking. And after she said she was on the way to the hospital, she said, "I need you." And I said, I'm in Arizona. I can't. She said, "I need you to help me with the kids. Sophia has a thing tonight at school." And I'm like, "I can't. I'm not there." And I pulled my car over to the side of the road, and the only other thing that I said was, "What hospital?"
Did she tell you what hospital?
She did, and she told me Atlanta Medical Center, which I had never heard of before. I had no idea where that was.
So when you pulled your car over to the side, did you say anything else to her?
she passed the phone over to her mother. And she also said, "Shana, we need you." And I said, "I can't. I'm not." And I said, "I'm in Arizona." And then her mother said, "Oh, she's not in town."
Tell us what anybody else said.
I'm sorry.
What you or the defendant said.
I'm sorry.
After that phone call, did you stay or did you make arrangements to leave Arizona?
Well, immediately after that phone call, I was already on the side of the road, and then I pulled into a shopping center that was right there, and immediately texted my husband, who was in a business meeting, and I said, "I'm okay, but walk out of wherever you are."
Why'd you tell him to walk out of wherever he was?
Because I had to tell him what Andrea had just told me.
And did you tell him?
So then I called him right after that, and I told him,
What'd you tell him?
I said, "Andrea just called me and said that Rusty's been shot." And he said, "What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense."
So
And I,
once you talked to your husband,
sorry.
did the two of you stay for the rest of your trip to Arizona, or did you make arrangements to leave?
No, we made arrangements to leave as quickly as we could
And
to come back.
did you in fact leave Arizona?
Oh, yes,
When?
very quickly that same day.
Same day. Did you come back to Atlanta?
Oh, yes.
When you came back to Atlanta, what, if anything, did you do? Where'd you go?
Immediately to their house,
Whose house?
Andrea and Rusty's house.
Was there anyone else at the house at the time?
Yes.
Do you remember who, or was it just one or two people, or were there several people at the house?
No, there were several people at the house.
So when you got to the house, what, if anything, did you do?
I walked in, and Andrea's mother was there, and Wendy Dell was there, and Wendy Dell
Okay.
and Joanna Genzer, Andrea Lippman. I don't recall if there was anybody else, but I remember those women being there.
And who were those women as it relates to the defendant?
Andrea's friends. I had never met Wendy Dell, and unless maybe at Sophia's birthday party, I had never met Andrea Lippman, and again, unless at one of the birthday parties or something. I do not recall ever meeting them previously.
So they were all there.
And
when you
Joanna.
got there, did you see the defendant?
Yes.
What'd you do?
I walked in, and somebody said, Shana's here. And I immediately rushed over to Andrea, and she was sitting in a chair, and when I got to her, she looked up to me and said, with tears in her eyes, she said, "It was not supposed to happen this way." And I hugged her, and I whispered in her ear that she had to tell the police about her boss.
Why'd you tell her?
That was the immediate thought that I had when I was still in Arizona. I had just gotten back to my hotel room to start packing. My husband had already gotten there first, and he was packing us. And I walked in, and I was on the phone with Joanna, and we were just talking about how we just couldn't believe what was happening. And I said, "Joanna, it's the boss. It's the boss. It has to be him." And she didn't know what I was talking about. She had no clue what I was talking about. She's like, "What are you talking about, the boss? What do you mean?"
So did you just say it out loud to her?
No, because I didn't know who else knew. So I whispered it in her ear.
Did she respond?
Yes,
How'd she respond?
in a whimper kind of thing, because she obviously was crying at that point. I said, you have to tell them about the boss. And she said, again in a whimper, she said, like she acknowledged it.
And the night you got to the house after getting back from Arizona, do you recall whether or not the police were there, or did they come? Do you know whether or not the police ever came at some point?
I had heard that they had been there, but I did not see them. By the time I got there, it was dark out. I don't recall what time, but I had just heard that they had already been there.
So you had heard that the police had been there that day, but they were not there by the time you got there?
Correct.
And that was on the 18th of November, the day Rusty was shot?
Yes.
Did you go to the defendant's house on the 19th of November?
It was the first thing we did when we woke up.
Describe the atmosphere that day. I mean, again, were there a lot of people there, or was it just the two of you, or a small, intimate group of friends?
No, there were a lot of people there. When we walked in, everybody was doing something. Everyone already appeared to have a job or something. It was very busy, and it seemed like there were a lot of things going on. And Andrea's father and brother were going up and down the stairs to do something upstairs. I remember people looking for Rusty's wallet, things like that.
On the 19th, do you know, or did you know whether or not the police were coming that day?
There came a point in time during that day that it became known to all of us that the police were coming
So you knew?
to question Andrea and her parents and Rusty's parents.
When you found out that the police were coming, did you say anything to the defendant about that?
Yes.
What'd you say?
Andrea's father had come down the steps and said where everyone in the house, well, I think everyone in the house heard.
Did you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and don't tell us what he said, but based on what he said, did you say anything to the defendant about what she needed to do when the police
Yes. Yes.
What'd you tell her?
I told her again that she needed to tell the police about her boss. And it was not just me telling her that.
Who else told her?
Andrea Littman.
Is that the other lady that you said was a friend of hers?
Yes.
And were you in fact at her house when the police arrived?
Yes.
Did you go into the room where the police were, or were you in some other part of the house?
Originally, I was told that,
Okay, don't tell us what anybody told you unless it's you or the defendant.
sorry, what was the question? Was
Were
I
you
in the room? No, I was not.
When the police were there?
No,
talking to the
I was at her kitchen table, and Andrea was with the police investigators in her dining room.
You know if she was in there with them alone, or were there other people in there?
No, her brother was in there, her parents, and Rusty's parents, and I don't recall if anybody else was in there.
And where were you?
I was sitting at the kitchen table.
Kitchen table. Were you able to hear the conversation that was taking place in the
No.
other room?
No. And there was a lot of noise going on. The kids were all there in the playroom, which was like diagonally across from, it was like a guest bedroom / playroom, and it was diagonally across from the dining room. So here's the dining room, here's the room where the kids were, and I was right here, and the kids kept going back and forth, and no,
Couldn't hear what was going on.
I could not hear.
Were you in the kitchen alone?
No.
Who else was in the kitchen with you?
Honestly, I don't recall. I know my husband was there somewhere. I'm assuming he was right next to me at that point. I don't know.
Did you have a conversation with anyone about the fact that the police were there and that the defendant was talking to them?
Yes.
And did you make any suggestions or say anything about what needed to happen in that room?
No, just to Andrea beforehand.
just the injury before you?
And then after the interview, I asked her if she told the police about her boss, and she said yes.
Do you know whether or not she told the police about specific things that her boss had done when she spoke to them?
No.
Now, I want to ask you whether or not you were aware of the fact that the police had a composite sketch done of the shooter. Did you become aware of the fact that a sketch had been done?
Yes.
And did you ever have an occasion to have a discussion with the defendant about the sketch?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
No.
Do you remember if it was before or after the police came to the house?
Yeah. I think it was, I'm sure it was after the police had been to the house.
That you had a discussion with her about the sketch?
Mm-hmm.
And what was that discussion about?
At some point, she said that the eyes of the sketch looked like Hemi.
Look like Hemi?
Yes.
And when she told you that the eyes in the sketch looked like Hemi, what, if anything, did you say?
I told her she needed to tell the police.
So, the fact that you told her she needed to tell the police, do you know whether you had this discussion before or after the police would have come to her house?
Well, after. Are you saying the first day that they came to the house or the second day that after the 19th?
Were you there more than once when they came to the house?
No.
Okay. So,
That was after the time that I was there.
after the time that you were there.
Yes.
And the time that you were there, when the police did come, did you at some point have a discussion with the defendant about whether or not she'd had any contact with Hemi?
Yes.
Was this the same day that the police arrived? Or that the police had come to the house to speak to her?
She told me while she and I were on the phone one day.
So, let me back up. The two of you had a discussion over the phone,
Yes.
which means you're not at the house anymore.
Correct.
You went home.
Yes.
Was it the same evening?
No.
Was it the next day?
The next day or a couple of days after, I don't recall.
Okay, somewhere close in time?
Some close in proximity to that time, but I don't recall
Back in
exactly what.
November.
Back in November.
Okay. So, when the police came to her house on November 19th, somewhere close to that time, the two of you had a discussion on the telephone.
Yes.
And what did she tell you about contact she had had with Hemi?
She told me she had called Hemi after the police investigators left her house
To tell you why she called Hemi?
to see, well, yes,
And before
Couple things.
before you tell me what she said, did she tell you why she called him?
yes,
Did she tell you about what time it was that she called him?
yes,
What time?
around midnight or so, after everyone went to sleep,
After everyone else in the house was asleep.
yes.
Did she tell you why she called the defendant, she called Hemi Newman, the shooter? Did the defendant tell you why she called him around midnight after everyone else had gone to sleep that night?
She told me she called him to tell him that she told the police about him and that she was she told me that she was trying to figure out if he had anything to do with it, and that she asked him if he had anything to do with it.
She asked Hemi Newman, close in time to when the police came to her house in November,
Yes,
if he had anything to do with Rusty's murder.
yes,
Did she say whether or not she told the police? Did she tell you whether or not she told the police she was going to call Hemi that night? Or close in time to that night?
I told her that she needed to tell the police, and she said to me, I'm afraid for what that would mean for me and my family,
For what would mean for her and her family?
for her to go to the police.
And tell the police what?
That she had asked Hemi if he had anything to do with it. And that the sketch, the eyes on the sketch looked like Hemi's.
She was afraid to tell the police that because of what it would mean for her and her family? Is that what she said to you?
And in almost those same words, I'm sorry, yes, and almost in those exact same words, when we had the same, very similar conversation in December, she said almost exactly the same way.
You'd had that conversation in December as well?
Yes,
Do you remember about when in December you had that conversation?
it was when she came back from a Florida trip with her family.
Did you have a discussion about something in December?
Yes,
Now, let me ask you, the conversation that you had with her about the telephone call she made to Hemi, was that before or after the trip
to Florida,
to Florida?
before.
Before, okay. So, in December, when you had the conversation with her after she came back from Florida, what was that conversation about?
She showed me an email that Hemi had sent to her while she was in Florida. It was an email that had a song attached to it or something.
Did you see the email?
Yes, she showed it to me on her phone.
When she showed you the email, what, if anything, did you say to her?
That she needed to tell the police.
Did she respond?
Again, I'm afraid for what that would mean for me and my family.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Hullinger. This is 11 Alive's continuing coverage of the Andrea Sneiderman trial. We are in the middle of a quick time out here. Here's the judge. Let's hear again from Gregory Adams as he is standing up and encouraging the jury to stand up and stretch. I'm joined this morning by Kelly Burke, who's the former district attorney from Houston County and is a practicing attorney. And we have heard once again from Shayna Citron some very emotional testimony that has really gotten the attention of everyone.
It has surely livened everything up. She's got a lot of drama packed in her voice and her tears.
All right, the courtroom, we will have more and more of your questions coming up as the morning and the afternoon proceeds.
Testimony this morning. Did you have a chance to review your audio videotape statement done on January 21st with Detective Thompson?
Yes,
You have seen that.
yes.
How many times have you seen that?
I saw it before Hemi's trial.
Did you see it before this trial as well?
At some point, yes.
And where did you see that?
In the prosecutor's office.
And was anybody with you when you viewed that videotape?
The videotape?
Audio tape. The video audio tape of yourself being interviewed by Detective Thompson on January 21st.
No, I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
You've never seen it?
No, I've read the transcript.
You've read the transcript of that audio
Yes.
video?
I've
Okay.
never seen the video.
And was there anything in your statement to Detective Thompson that morning that was incorrect?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Can you be specific?
Let me ask you, were you truthful and honest with Detective Thompson that morning?
Yes.
Have you reviewed your prior testimony
Yes.
in this trial?
Yeah.
Okay. And where did you review that?
Again, in the district attorney's office.
And was anybody with you at that time?
My attorney.
You have an attorney for this case, is that
course.
correct? And your attorney's been on national television regarding this case. Have you watched him?
Objection, Your Honor, as to relevance, as to what activities her attorney may have done as it relates to this witness.
Mr. Morgan, why is that relevant?
As it goes to her credibility and her reason for testifying this morning.
I'm going to sustain that objection as far as that, your last question was whether, and I'm paraphrasing, whether or not her attorney had been on national TV and whether or not she had watched them. I'm going to sustain that objection. You may ask questions to go to those issues, but I'm going to
Okay.
sustain that objection.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Have you agreed to give any interviews after your testimony today?
No.
Have you been approached about giving any interviews?
I have been called by the media, absolutely. And I have directed them all to my attorney.
So you've directed these to your attorney until after your testimony, is that correct?
That is not correct. I have directed them to my attorney.
Okay. Again, in your prior testimony, you've had the chance to review it. Was there anything incorrect or anything you want to change today about that testimony?
No.
And in that approximately hour interview with Detective Thompson, just the two of you alone talking about these details, you did not shed a tear, did you now?
I did not share the what?
Shed a tear.
Don't recall.
Okay. And in your prior testimony in this case, you did not shed a tear, did you?
Got really choked up, and I remember my lip shaking. And the circumstances were much different.
Okay. I want to direct your attention back to November the 18th when you received the phone call from Andrea and you were in Arizona. Did you receive that on your cell phone number?
I did.
And what was your cell phone number on this November 18th, 2010, please?
404-667-8507.
And was that the only call you received from Andrea that morning?
That is the only call that I received from Andrea Sneiderman.
Okay. And your phone, does it change automatic time zones when you're in another time zone, or do you have to reset?
Believe it. That's a good question.
You don't recall at that particular time?
I don't recall.
Arizona does not have daylight savings time, so that would be approximately a 2-hour time difference in November, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember have you looked at your own phone records, or do you recall the approximate time that you received that phone call?
Yes.
And what time was that?
It was around 8:30 Arizona time.
So that would be
Roughly.
10:30 Eastern time, correct?
It could be 10 minutes before or after. I have no idea, but yes, around that time frame.
And what was her demeanor?
Her demeanor, I didn't see her, but as far as from her voice, it was frantic.
Was she crying? Could you tell?
No, she was not crying.
Did she tell you where she was going?
Yes,
And again, where was that?
to the hospital.
And was someone else in the car with her, I believe you said, correct?
Her mother.
And you actually spoke with her mother as well.
I did.
Did she tell you at that time what had happened to Rusty?
That he had been shot.
That evening, you went to the home. Or did you make it back in Atlanta that evening, or was
I
that the
did.
next day?
That evening.
Okay, and you went straight to Rusty and Andrea's house, correct?
That is correct.
Did you see the police come that evening?
No.
And you were there the following day.
Yes, of course.
And were you present when the police interviewed Andrea?
I was in the next room.
Okay. And you had told Andrea that she should tell the police about her boss.
Yes,
You asked her after that interview whether she told the police.
yes.
And what did she say?
She said she did.
Okay. Now, let me explore, if we could, your relationship with Andrea. You knew each other BC, right? Before
I'm sorry?
children.
Yes.
You were both couple friends.
The friendship was primarily Andrea and I. But yes, of course, we got together as couples.
And your friendship was very close for those 8 years.
Yes,
And you could share anything and everything with each other.
yes,
And that's what you have testified to previously, right?
yes.
And in fact, when Andrea was talking to you in the GE parking lot about her sex life, you gave her your own sexual advice, did you not?
Not sexual advice, but yes.
Well, you related your own experiences
Your
with
Honor, objection as to the relevance of any of her own personal experiences.
Right? It is to
Well,
show the intimate relationship
I
between these two people.
I want to overrule the objection. I'm going to allow you to ask questions pertaining to the conversation that took place in that motor vehicle. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Okay?
That's what you're asking about, the conversation in that motor
That's
vehicle.
correct.
All right, yes, sir. You may continue.
Thank you, Judge. And you shared with Andrea your own sex life with your husband during that conversation, did you not?
Yes.
So there's nothing you two women did not share with each other, correct?
I felt like I could share anything with her and vice versa.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, you did not hide anything from each other, did you?
To the best of my, I wouldn't say that. At that point, I had already felt as though Andrea had lied to me.
All right. Well, let's talk about the tension. You talked about the tension in the marriage. You said you first noticed this tension after a dance recital, you and your husband, Rusty and Andrea. And actually, Andrea was in the dance recital.
She was.
Do you recall what her mode of dance was? Jazz, tap?
Tap.
And y'all went out to eat.
Yes.
And you said that was in May.
I believe it was May. I do not recall if it was
And she started work in
May.
April. Do you recall that, when she started work?
That was my recollection. I could be off, but yes.
So it's just a short time after she was started.
Yes.
And you work.
Yes.
You have young children,
Yes.
2.
Mm-hmm.
Your husband works as well. He's the CPA.
Mm-hmm.
And would you not agree that when 2 people work in a marriage and they have young children, there's tension in that marriage?
To some degree.
Okay. In your own marriage as well, then?
To some degree. But nothing that lasts as long as what
And-
she has told me.
Would you agree that the tension in Andrea and Rusty's marriage was no different than the tension in any other marriage where both couples work and have young children?
At what point are you asking me about?
Talking about during the entire time.
During the entire time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was conflicted about whether or not, and I kept going back and forth, was this a typical situation or was it not? Is this marriage in true detriment or is this something they're going to get past?
Do you recall having a conversation on January 21st, 2010, I'm excusing that would be 2011, with Detective Thompson at the Dunwoody Police Station?
I do.
And do you recall Detective Thompson asking you specifically about the tension in the marriage?
I do.
And do you recall your response to Detective Thompson at that time?
At that particular moment in time, I was thinking it had been a typical...
Please, you can answer the question yes or no and then explain. Do you recall your answer to Detective Thompson?
Yes.
And what was your answer?
My answer at that particular day was that it was a typical situation.
In fact, you told him that the tension in Rusty and Andrea's marriage was no different than any other couple who worked and had young children. And things got better, didn't they? With your advice. You gave Andrea some advice that really helped the marriage.
That's what she told me in not so many words, but yes,
Okay. And what was your advice?
to get a nanny to help out in the evening hours.
And that was your statement to the detective on January 21st, shortly after the murder. Now I wanted to call your attention to the September 1st luncheon at Fuddruckers. I guess that's the one near Galleria. Is that correct?
It's the one off of Powers Ferry. Do you consider that near Galleria? I don't know.
And it's just the two of you.
Yes.
And you said that was about a 2-hour lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And the first hour you spent talking about yourself and your children.
That's right.
And then Andrea came to you for some advice, did she not?
Yes.
And she was seeking advice on what to do with a boss that was hitting her, right?
Mhm.
She brought that up to you.
She did.
Closest friend, her confidant that you relied on to give her information.
Mhm.
And in your own testimony, you said you've had your own personal experience of sexual harassment in the workplace, right?
I wouldn't be as strong as to say it that, but yes, I had the same situation. No, not the same situation that Andrea was having. However, I had been hit on, if that's what you're recalling,
Okay.
if
Was
that's what
that-
you're asking.
Was that in a workplace environment?
Business trips, yes.
Okay, business trips. And was that by a male or female colleague?
I'm not saying that it's a colleague.
Okay. Well, it's a business trip, but you're being hit on by somebody who's not on the business trip. And
That's not what I'm saying either.
Okay, please explain. You told Detective Thompson that you've had experience with sexual harassment, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then elaborate, please.
So when I go on business trips, I go to conventions. At those conventions, I see business associates that I work with, that are in the same agency. I also see clients,
Okay.
and I also see clients of other agents in my agency.
So again, you have experienced sexual harassment in the work environment. And Andrea was seeking your advice on this, right?
On how to handle it. And my advice to her was to stay strong, to never stay on the same floor.
All right, well, first of all, did you told Detective Thompson, this is just something women have to put up with, is that right?
Unfortunately, sometimes it happens, yes. And you stick to
And when
your...
you say put up with,
Your Honor,
No.
Hold on for a second.
Don't twist my words.
One second. What's the objection?
the objection is counsel is cutting the witness off in the middle of her answer. I would just ask that she be allowed to.
Oh, I will allow her to finish it. Since she made the objection, I will allow her to finish.
Thank you.
Mr.
I'm
Morgan,
sorry, Judge, if I interrupted,
problem.
I'll let her finish.
just like you cut me off. Mr. Morgan, if you
No,
could allow the
I have
witness
added that.
I understand, but since an objection's been made, I will impose myself a little bit more. I'm gonna let the witness finish her answer. Did you finish your answer, ma'am?
Honestly, I don't even remember what the question was.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Morgan. Next question.
Thank you. Did you advise Andrea to report this to Human Resources?
It never once occurred to me.
And why not?
Well, first of all, the agency the corporation that I'm with, we don't have a human resources department. So it's not something that's on the forefront of my mind. Having said that, previous places that I worked, there were human resource departments, but where I work, we do not have one. At least we did not at that time. Also, she had just told me how much she loved her job, and how she was making an impact.
Go ahead.
Never occurred to me.
So the
And I
fact
told the
that-
police that as well.
I thought she had was joking.
That's fine. Go ahead.
And I had told the police that as well, that it never occurred to me.
And you were just saying because she loved her job as a woman, you would not advise her to report this.
No, that is not what I said.
Okay? You just put, you don't have the human resources and the fact that she loved her job was the reasons it never occurred to you to tell her.
It did not occur to me, but I also did not tell her not to.
Did you tell her she should tell Rusty?
I asked her if this was something she could handle.
My question was, did you tell her this is something she should tell Rusty?
You know, I don't recall. It's very possible that I did. I don't know.
Did you tell your husband when you were hit on in the workplace?
Absolutely, every single time.
Okay. Let's talk about the hotel rooms. Elaborate on that, please. What are you saying about hotel rooms?
What am I saying about hotel rooms?
You gave her advice about hotel rooms. Please elaborate.
I know that it would be extremely awkward to get off from the elevator and walk on the same floor as that person. It would potentially become uncomfortable if that person was walking her to her room, and would it stop there? Therefore, if you stay on different floors, you eliminate that whole situation.
Okay. So, then it's your opinion that a man should not escort a woman to her room if she's on a business trip? Cross over separate.
Not if he's hitting on her, no. She should not allow that.
The fact that people have separate rooms at other ends of the hotel doesn't stop them from having sex, does it?
I'm telling you what I told her.
Okay. And the fact that two rooms could be together doesn't mean they're having sex, does it? A walk of shame can be a couple feet or 100 yards, right?
If you would like to say that.
Okay. So what is going on behind closed doors is only between those two people, is that right?
If you would like to say that.
Now, you were questioned by the prosecution as to what you asked Andrea whether or not it made a difference that she was married.
Yes.
Okay, and what did she say?
Maybe if she was not, if she maybe if she had not been married, maybe she would be interested.
And what else did she say?
She said a lot of things. Are you? I don't know what.
Do you recall being asked that specific question in the prior trial?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pro Shop.
You may.
May I speak?
You may.
I apologize. Miss it? Transcript of your prior hearing, and just read it to yourself. Lines 10 through 17, please.
Mr. Morgan, while she's reviewing that, the jurors have indicated they want a break. It'll be, ladies and gentlemen, since you give me an indication it's break time, it'll be 10, assume you go, it'll be 10 minutes. We're going to recess for 10 minutes. All rise.
And welcome back to 11 Alive's continuing coverage of the trial of Andrea Sneiderman. I'm Jeff Hullinger, along with the former District Attorney of Houston County. Attorney Kelly Burke joins us today. Kelly, good to have you in the house.
Well, thank you for having me.
I know it's going to be a very long and